Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Way is in Training. This is a podcast exploring how warriors should train and fight, as well as how they should live. We will talk about technique, but we'll also dive deep into fitness, mindset, and strategy. We will explore leadership and philosophy as well. So whether you are a young soldier, a veteran police officer, a responsible armed citizen, or simply someone looking for an authentic life, let's examine how the lessons of combat and preparation for it can help us fulfill our potential. Let's explore the way together and learn how the discipline of training can show us our true selves amidst the chaos of life.
Hey everybody, welcome back. On this episode, I've got Mike Seeklander, phenomenal competitive shooter and instructor. Also got, military and real world experience as well, and U.S. Marshals, right? The Air Marshals also.
Air Marshals, yes, sir.
Yes, yep. So I'm really looking forward to this one. It should be a really good conversation. Mike is not only a good performer, he's a high-level thinker. I own several of his training stuff, books and videos, and it's always good stuff. So I'm looking forward to this one a lot. Real quick, Mike, if you don't mind, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about your background?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on the show, man. This is a long time in the making, and it was my fault that pushed and got my dates conflicted. So sorry about that, and I'm happy to come on, man. And also, just before I talk about my bio, it was nice to meet you in person the other day at the match we met at. So background, it's funny, Matt, every time I give my bio or my background, I feel like I have jumped from thing to thing to thing in my career, and technically I have, but I've always kind of been weirdly presented with a next opportunity and have taken it oftentimes just because I want to live my life and learn whatever I possibly can. Grew up in rural Wyoming and Idaho on ranches. I grew up shooting guns and running around mountains and hunting and trapping and fishing and doing all kinds of things. And in 1990, when about a year after I graduated high school, I joined the Marine Corps. And in the Marine Corps, I was guaranteed an MOS of 0331, which was machine gunner. And then in boot camp, I tested really high on a bunch of tests. And they said, hey, you're too smart to be a machine gunner, which I don't agree with that at all. And they put me in initially presidential support and then moved me into Intel, gave me a chance to transfer into a different MOS. So I took it and ran with it. Literally months later, Desert Shield and Storm kicked off. So I was there for that shortly afterwards. I actually went through Intel school and a couple different Marine Corps schools, and then got shipped directly over to Saudi Arabia, and then spent 5 years total in active duty on the Marine Corps. Did a little bit of active duty special work, did some counter drug missions, and then got out into the reserves for a very short period of time, where I got into law enforcement and spent some years in local law enforcement at the sheriff level, and then at the city level in Knoxville, Tennessee, and then got hired by the Air Marshals right after 9/11, like literally December 29th of 01, and went up and joined the training team and ended up out shooting all of the other instructors in a demo day. And they said, hey, you're the lead instructor. So it was a weird thing, Matt, because I had almost no experience as an instructor. All these guys were distinguished retired Marines, retired SF guys. I mean, very, very elite careers. And so it was cool. And from there, moved on to Biloxi for a short period of time, the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, and then on to an academy here locally, which is in Tulsa, Oklahoma, to run the U.S. Shooting Academy. And since then, I've been doing my own thing, teaching through shooting performance, running the American Warrior Society. Of course, you've been on our podcast, the American Warrior Show, and shoot guns professionally, semi-professionally, call it whatever you want. So that's kind of who I am.
Well, I would say it's definitely if not financially at a professional level, because I know how the world of shooting is. As far as performance goes, it's definitely a professional level. You've been like at the top tier for a long time now. And it's funny because I've had a lot of conversations about you with a bunch of people that are mutual friends. And the general consensus from everybody, including me, is you should be a lot more famous than you are.
That's funny, man. I've actually heard that before. And I don't know if I should
Not,
respond like,
not
yeah,
that you're not that you're not no no I mean, not that you're not well known, but it
right.
seems like a lot of the people that are maybe louder in their social media get more attention, and you just are a quiet professional. Keep your nose to the grindstone and keep on performing. So it's nice to see. It's nice to see a touch of class in the shooting world for sure.
Well, thank you, man, and I agree. You just said a key thing. There are a lot of people out there that are louder, really. And it's funny because I see, as you do probably, we're fighting our way through social media, trying to get exposure. In these days and age, you have to do those kind of things. And sometimes I'm like, well, I just don't feel real big or real boisterous or real, impressive out there. But then I kind of start to go through my resume, and it's like, oh well, I forgot I did that. I have done a couple things, but Matt, my whole dedication has been to shooting and training other people. I mean, just skill development. Your book, The Way is Training, that literally, I used to have some of Musashi's quotes on the outside of a folder. I don't know if they were like his legitimate quotes. They were someone paraphrased, the Way is Training. I literally had 4 or 5 of his quotes on the outside of a folder I used to carry around many years ago. So it's interesting that, but that's who I am. Yes, sir.
Well, it's funny. And I want to come back to something else too, but the whole Musashi thing, right? Like I had such a strange childhood because I was so heavily into like classical Japanese martial arts as a kid. And back then it wasn't a kid's thing. It wasn't like you went to every strip mall and there was a kid's karate class, Back then, well, and you're a traditional karate guy too, I think, right? Is it?
That's right. Yeah. My first black belt was in Okinawan freestyle karate, which my instructor actually was originally Ishinryu, and then
Right.
he got his hands up. He dropped a lot of the katas. He incorporated bare knuckle, full contact, leg kicking, stuff like that, and then it renamed his art Okinawan freestyle karate. Tom Mossman out of Jacksonville, North Carolina. I don't even know where Tom is these days, but it was. There's a lot of stories there. If you want to dig into some cool training, we should go down that road because I've actually really rarely talked about that on the podcast. And I'll give you just a quick example. On day number 1 of training with Tom, a corporal that I knew in my unit said, "Hey, let's go do this karate stuff." And I'm like, "Oh, I've always wanted to get into that. Let's do it." So we takes me and we go to this little place outside Jacksonville, North Carolina. And the dojo, Matt, is literally a shack. I'm not joking. It's basically a shack. And Tom is actually living in, I think, like a trailer or an RV just on top of the hill. Later on, he moved to a house close to that. So we get in and we do introductions, and Tom he's got this long hair and a ponytail. He's just loud. He's just a classic Marine, right? He's quintessential. So we go in and bow in. He teaches us how to bow in. There's 3 or 4 other students. There's probably 5 or 6 people there total that day, including me and the other guy. And I go into this little shack and there's holes. All of the drywall is punched out or broken out. Like all of the walls are broken from human bodies getting kicked into the walls. And we go outside after we bow in, and we're all in bare feet, of course. I didn't have a gi on. I was in shorts because I didn't have a gi at that point in time. And he takes off running, and everybody else follows him. It's a gravel road. And then he leads us to a gravel road, and we take a right onto a paved road. We're bare feet, right?
Yep.
So we run. We did probably a 1.5 to 2 mile loop, which came back through a field and some dirt in bare feet. And I'm like, wow, what, as with the traditional martial artists, that body hardening, although a lot of people may listen to that and say, well, that's the stupidest thing ever. Just like I worked on a Makiwara outside that dojo for hours and hours and hours, right? I used to, just like you, I used to look at a person and identify if they were a threat by their 2 knuckles, right? And, if they had 2 knuckles that were calloused together. And later on, as I got older and smarter, I laid off that a bit because my knuckles were creaking so much, and I'm glad I can close my hands now. But I don't know if I've ever actually told that story on a podcast. It was wild, man. It was pretty weird. So,
yeah, and like I started out in a Shotokan karate under
there we go,
named Mikami out of New Orleans. And it's funny because like now people think of this, and we're not arguing the changes to practicality and technique. I'm not talking about that. We're just talking about the training itself. It was so much more hardcore back then than it seems to be now. I mean, I remember just I remember when I went in the military, part of what got me through a lot of the tough stuff was knowing that I'd been through those workouts back with Mikami and how brutal they were.
Absolutely, man. And Shotokan, for the listeners in your audience that probably know, that would be like the sister art to what I did. I mean, Shotokan, as you know, is well known as the hard style, low leg kicks, full contact. So neither of us grew up in a point style system. We did not.
It was
points.
technically points.
Right. Technically, right, yeah, broken ribs in a sternum and whatever else. I got to the point where, as I evolved and got better and better and better, I've had hip problems throughout my life to an extent, maybe inflexibility. So higher kicking was not my style. I couldn't do a lot of high kicking. So all the time, a lot of people spent on higher kicking. I spent on low leg kicks. And I got to the point in our dojo back in the day where when we sparred, it was all what we called full contact. We didn't allow punches to the face, which sounds kind of odd, but we weren't an MMA gym. But my sensei, Tommy, would not allow me with most students to throw leg kicks anymore because they were just too damaging, and I was pretty efficient with them.
So back to the Musashi thing, right? Because here's what happened with me is I'm this teenager and I'm training with adults that are like hard men. And like I said, we can argue increase in practicality and technique throughout the years since then. And I'm not saying that's not a thing. Like MMA, if nothing else, has brought a lot of realism to the way people train.
Yeah.
Right. So not arguing that, but these were men that were like tough adults who'd been in fights. They weren't people just playing a game of tag, So I'm this kid and like I'm thrown in this kind of mix of like all these really aggressive, fit adults. And it was kind of sink or swim. And once a month on Sunday, Mikami Shihan would have like samurai movie day at the dojo. And they had like literally a projector. And you get up and they'd open up the screen and they'd watch all these Kurosawa films, Jumbo Sanjuro, Seven Samurai, maybe, Harakiri or Sword of Doom mixed in. And we did the Musashi trilogy. And that had such a powerful effect on me as a kid. It's one of the two reasons I joined the military. It was that and going to see Rambo with my dad when it first came out, right? And like those two things are kind of why I joined the Army, to be honest, because I wanted it to be all the training I'd done as a martial artist. I wanted it to be real, right? I wanted it to mean something, not just be academic. So there was the Army.
Yeah, that's wild. So in that, man, we followed so many of the same paths that I didn't realize this. How old are you, Matt?
I am 57.
Okay, and I'm 54, so I'm just a little bit behind you. But you are exactly right, man. And it's funny when you talk about these guys being hard men. Like Tommy Mossman, my sensei, was a hard man. He actually used to bring in, back in the day, MMA didn't exist. The UFC hadn't quite happened. And he used to bring in, or a guy that used to come train at our dojo was a guy named Dennis Hurricane Lane. I don't know whatever happened to Dennis Hurricane Lane. He had won a world title in some fight, but this guy was a big black guy, unbelievably powerful, just a scary human being. Like I had really powerful leg kicks or whatever else. And I remember training with Dennis, a hard man, like we talked about, and he'd be like, kick me, and I'd kick him, and he'd be like, no, kick me hard, and I'm laying a leg kick in that would have broken the leg of most people in our dojo that I wasn't even allowed to use in sparring at that point in time. I think I was probably still a brown belt, and this guy was just a predator, man. He was just amazing, super nice guy, but he had these piercing black eyes that, oh man, he was a scary human. But there were several guys in that dojo that were unbelievable. But I don't know if a lot of people realize that in the world of MMA, those, like you said, the technicalities are completely different in terms of ground fighting. Later on, I went and I trained with the Gracies in California. But man, you meet some of these hard karate dudes, and I think those first two knuckles, and probably some callousing and some, little calcium deposits on their elbows and shins hard as a rock. I don't think people realize how dangerous some of those guys are,
Well, and you've seen it now that as MMA has evolved, you get guys like Stephen Thompson and George St. Pierre, guys with strong karate backgrounds, and they've adapted to making it more well-rounded, and they typically do pretty well. Lyoto Machida was a Shotokan guy.
Sure.
And he did fantastic. But I guess kind of what I'm getting at is we can argue technique and practicality all day long, and that's an argument that can definitely be had. But that training set my life on the path that went for my entire adult life.
Yeah. Well, you are exactly right. And a funny story on my story, the guy that brought me to class, he might have came back for one more session maybe, but he quit almost immediately, right? Tom used to always laugh. He's like, yeah, the guy that brought you just quit right away, because that first day was so hard. It was in the middle of the summer, 2.5 mile barefoot in North Carolina, sun and humidity. And then we went to the dojo and trained, right? The strikes. And I remember that day we go outside and he's got these boards that are wrapped with wood, some 4x4s and some 2x4s. And we started working conditioning drills. And I totally agree, man. Anything hard in the Marine Corps at that point in time, or hard that I did later on, just didn't compare to some of the things that I did in that dojo.
And even selection for special forces, right? The duration, how can I put it? The sustained duration of events was longer.
Yeah.
Some events took you days, but there were no individual moments that were harder than anything I've been put through under Mikami. There were no individual events that were harder. There were just more events in a longer duration with less time to rest.
Yeah, I agree, man. It's funny. I've never really thought about that. I've never actually, this is a great podcast so far because it's bringing out things I've literally never talked about. I never really have considered what gave me some of the tenacity that I have. And it was absolutely those days and months in the dojo. And by the way, we didn't have any AC or heat in that dojo. So in the summer, it was sweltering hot, 95 to 100 degrees and humid. In the winter, it was freezing cold, right? So you're exactly right, man. I've never really put it together, but that led me down a pathway of tenacity that I would not have today.
And even the dojo I'm going to now, great guy, retired Austin PD, was SWAT in the bomb squad, really solid dude. And it's BJJ and judo. And it's a steel shed, prefab shed, and you open the big doors and you turn a fan on, and that's it.
It's hard, man. It's funny thing is most people wouldn't stick with that, right? They just wouldn't do it, Yeah. And I'm not saying that everything should be that hard. We're a little bit older, hopefully a little wiser,
I would have liked to have trained a little smarter.
Right.
There's some things I did between the martial arts and special forces that have definitely contributed to the surgeries I've had. Let's just put it that way.
Yes.
It's not all acute injuries. Some of it's just plain old overuse.
Well, yeah, man. I've had, a lot of people don't realize I've had 2 total hip replacements. And there's no doubt that a bunch of things I did in the Marine Corps contributed. I didn't jump in the Marine Corps, but we had a commander at one point in time that we did boots and utes runs and lots of humping and maybe some inflexibility in my hips. I'm not certain where it came from, but there's no doubt that pounding with good old jungle boots over for miles and miles and miles and miles did that, and then I had a couple injuries in the Marine Corps and a wreck I was involved in. But, I was also very encouraged to keep going and training in this place. My gunnery sergeant was in charge of me. He was like, yeah, go train. He called me Iron Mike. And but I threw a lot of leg kicks, a lot of kicks. Back then, Marine close combat was called line training. So there were a lot of kicking. So this all added to that.
We had lines in special forces for a little while. I remember it.
Yeah. Was it linear in close neuro engagement or something like that? So,
Yeah, something to make the word lines. That's all it
yeah,
was.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what are several words I can turn an acronym into lines?
Well, as you know, in the military, man, everything has to have an acronym, right? Everything has an acronym. It's pretty
Well,
funny.
and then if somebody else gets in charge of the schoolhouse and needs some bullet points in their OER, there's a new acronym.
That's right.
That,
100%.
that means the exact same thing.
Yeah.
No,
That's
but
exactly
it's
right.
different because I changed the order. No,
Right. Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, I've played the game long enough. You change the order so you can have a new acronym to make a bullet point so you can get promoted.
That's right, man. That's exactly right.
So anyway, like I really wanted to talk to you about this because, like, for me, shooting was just a part of the martial arts for me. Like even shooting matches, it's like when I fought tournaments in karate, that was always secondary because yes, it's valuable. You need that resisting opponent, you need that feedback, and for shooting, you need that timer pressure and the psychological pressure of everybody watching you and doing a drill that somebody else came up with. But in both endeavors, for me, it was really always about the ability to fight, and the competition was it was fun, but it was a secondary thing, you know. And a lot of the ways I looked at training when I started shooting competitively, I took right from my previous stuff with martial arts because it just seemed to kind of resonate. So I want to hear from you about, because like I said, I've got some of your defensive program books and they're phenomenal. And I've got your competition video. Actually, I bought it on Amazon. So I own it on Amazon Prime.
Yeah.
And it's good stuff, but it looks to me like you've got kind of the same mindset. And I wanted to ask you about that.
Man, yeah. So when I to segue into shooting, I'd always been a shooter as a kid. I had pellet guns, 22s, rifles. I mean, I grew up in Wyoming and Idaho, so we hunted. If I was out and about in the woods or outside of my house, I had a gun. So I grew up literally shooting and owning guns. And I got really into handguns before I graduated high school. I used to have my dad's best friend. My dad was a former Marine, and my dad's best friend was a former Marine. John Maxwell, I used to call him Uncle John. And John was a police officer, maybe in Leeds, South Dakota for a while. I'm not certain, but he would come and visit my dad, and he would habitually bring his service revolver to visit my dad. And I was always incredibly excited because John would take me out and let me shoot his revolver. And I just fell in love with handguns. I mean, I shot a lot of rifles, but I just loved it. So fast forward to the Marine Corps, where of course, every Marine is a rifleman, and I qualify in the Marine Corps, and I'm doing these things. And then somewhere along the road, I heard about USPSA in IPSC, right? There was probably a local club match. I got a DVD probably with Rob Latham and Jerry Barnhart or these guys on it. And I'm like, I really want to do that. So I was actually on a med float, a deployment, and I ordered all of the gear and had this Colt Gold Cup back in the day. That was the cool gun. Single stack, comped, 45 ACP Colt Gold Cup. And that was right before everybody switched over to 38 Supers built and got into it. And I got into it because I really wanted to shoot handguns and compete. But if you look at my career, where I'm in either the military or law enforcement, and then I'm competing and continuing to compete at a high level, they're very much parallel, just like you. I was always interested in shooting the gun better for the fighting aspects because I was really into being a Marine, and went to Desert Shield and Desert Sword, and then later on a police officer. Being as prepared as I possibly could, but I did love the competition stuff as well. So I did, and then, in terms of my books, I wrote the competition book first because I was so heavily involved in that. And I knew that it was a market that was viable. But when I wrote the defensive book, I took all of the things that I had learned by competing at a high level. And like I said, the timer, man, performing under the timer, I call it the brain scrambler. It's just a fantastic way to test your true skill and manipulation abilities under as much simulated stress as you possibly can. Yeah, but I agree with you. I did the same thing.
I got a question, like a feeder question off of that.
Okay.
Because I want to ask you the same thing I've had conversations about with pretty much everybody I know who's both been in combat and has competed. And for me, I have never felt the stress in a gunfight, whether a tick overseas or, use of force back home, as I do when that timer goes off, especially in a big match. Like, it's, for some reason, the level of stress is higher for me.
Yeah.
And I've gotten the same answer from everybody else. They always say the same thing I do, that it's different when you're in a fight. A fight is like you're imposing your will over someone else, and they're trying to kill you, you're trying to kill them, and it just feels different than the timer. Not that it's not stressful, but for me, it was never anywhere near as stressful at being at like a complex match, whether it's a local with high standards and good shooters or a major match. I'm always dumber when the timer goes off than I am when people are trying to shoot me.
Yeah.
And I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Man, I think that's probably a common equation across the board. And, when for me personally, I've always been a warrior at heart. I was in Desert Shield and Desert Storm, but I didn't get the same combat that the guys in the GWAT did. I was not an SF guy. I was a Marine. We were engaged multiple times by mortars. Probably the largest volume of fire I experienced was unfortunately a sister unit. I've, participated in the fragging and clearing bunkers and stuff like that. But I have not been when I was a police officer, I was never in a gunfight. I've had the trigger prepped. I've had a guy shoot a guy in front of me that I chased down and effected arrest on. So I've been in a lot of really crazy, hairy situations. And as far as fights, a lot of fights and a lot of information processing at speed, but maybe not the same. And I don't know what your true combat background is, gunfight experience that you have. But in the things that I have done, I would completely agree with that whether it's I've been in some wild pursuits and some crazy situations that probably should have led to a shooting, but didn't for whatever reason. And the information processing and stress level did seem lesser than like maybe this last year at the Nationals or a match that I've been to or whatever else. It is weird, man, that people have heard that. And I've heard stories of this, and I have personal friends that are in special operations units and elite level government entities that get much more stressed out with that timer effect versus when the actual bullets are flying. And I tell you, an interesting correlation, and I can't correlate it to a super big running gun battle with a bunch of bank robbers, but I remember being in a bunch of pretty high level simunition exercises. Yep. One was in FLETC, another one was in a different training course that I was in. And I was a top level shooter by then, master class GM level shooter. And I had such a relaxed information processing flow in those simulation exercises that normally cause people to have their hair sets on fire and they just lose it, right? They get all stressed out. I felt like I was flowing and relaxed and seeing the guns and sights and clearing malfunctions. And, Matt, I can't tell you if tomorrow or today or if I was in a CQB experience, if I would see and process the same thing on the gun, because I've never been in a CQB experience where I shot people. I've been in a lot of CQB experiences where I've took people down, but I didn't shoot anybody. I'd be curious. I think I would see and feel the same thing because high level competition exposes you to stress repeatedly, and it really teaches you how to process information under stress. I think that's incredibly valuable, and I've seen that play out many times in a lot of different scenarios, too, and including high level takedowns where I use some of the same things that I learned in competing, like visualizing a takedown, for example, of where my vehicle needed to be positioned. And in that particular takedown with the FBI, I was the shotgun guy. So I had to both, get my vehicle into place, get it parked so it wouldn't roll away, get out with the shotgun, deploy the shotgun, and put a lot of things in place. And it was just like, oh, this is like a stage. I know that sounds stupid, like I'm comparing them, but it's all information processing in order. That's what competitive shooting is. So hope that answers your question.
No, it does. And actually leads me to something else I want to talk about. So, you know how Bruce Lee talked about how there's techniques and there's attributes, and it's two different things you need to develop in different ways, right?
Yes.
So I would say that visual processing speed is an attribute. USPSA, specifically IDPA 2, And I'm not arguing about which one is better. That's what I mean. It's just the pace is faster in USPSA.
Yes, it is.
When I started competing in USPSA, I expected it to help me become a better shooter in the abstract. What I didn't expect was that it made me better at CQB.
Oh, I'm sure it did.
And it's not because it's technically the same. I mean, yes, if you break down the building blocks of movement, movement is movement.
Yep.
Shooting is shooting, but it's a different context and you apply it with different priorities, right? So you wouldn't think there'd be a direct training carryover, but there was. And I'm convinced it's because of the visual processing speed. It's like all of a sudden CQB felt slower, and it always felt a little bit slow to me because I tended to move faster than my teammates. So I had to kind of pull myself back. Because you can't go faster than the other guys or you mess everything up, right? So that was the hardest part for me in training, was learning to dial down the Tasmanian devil that's in my heart. But I found that the pace felt even slower and more methodical to me after I started shooting USPSA. And I'm nowhere near the competitor you are, but when I made masterclass in USPSA, that's when it seemed to change.
Yeah.
All of a sudden the sights looked different and CQB looked very different. I was able to open up my vision and awareness much broader than I had been able to before because it took much less bandwidth to shoot at that pace.
Man, I think you are exactly right. And I think if more teams and more guys that maybe needed to do CQB understood what the value it would have. There's a weird flow. We flow, and the better at information processing, visual information processing, as well as now taking your gun handling skills and applying it in that flow, that you can absolutely apply it to CQB. And a lot of people are like, well, that competition shooting, get you killed on the street, it'll train you bad habits. No, I totally agree with what you said. Movement is movement, right? It's not static and stoic. It's really good movement is flowing. And I've had an opportunity to watch some of the best CQB operators out there multiple times. No, we won't discuss who they are, but everybody probably can guess who they are. And it was also very interesting to me when they would break it down and they might say, and you would probably have had this experience, that, well, so-and-so on the team has been around much longer and they're much better at CQB. And I dug into that a little bit and they're like, well, what do you mean they're better at CQB? Well, they're just better. They're significantly better. And this individual saying, I have a hard time keeping up. And when I dug into it, it was his inability to process information at the speeds that his team leader could. And that was just the reps. So that's the same thing in USPSA. We're using the brain. Well, the brain is malleable. What we're really working on is the brain through the information processing decision-making cycle. And we're applying marksmanship and manipulation skills while we're doing that. So then you apply that to a specific method or tactic you might use in your CQB team. To me, I would completely agree. It would make you a better CQB operator. And my CQB has been drug searches and drug warrants and stuff where I've, probably done 20, 50, I don't know how many entries on drug warrants. So it's certainly not the same as the military CQB that you've done, but the principles are a lot of the same. Just maybe the use of force was a different level. And I know you did that in law enforcement too, but I totally agree with what you said.
And I think this kind of talks about a bigger issue on the tactical side of the house, I think. And it has gotten better. It's gotten markedly better in the last 5 years. But I think there's also still a ways to go. And I think some people, the pendulum has actually swung too far. We can come back to that later. That's a separate topic, right? But USPSA style shooting, like shooting a USPSA style stage, yes, it is not tactical. But like I said, it trains skills under stress, but it also trains attributes. And it's kind of like that's overspeed training for the real world because you're moving at a faster pace. And people make the mistake of only moving at the pace they're going to do in the real thing. But then that pace becomes their red line. That's their 100%. You never want your operational pace to be your 100%. It should be about 80, I think. So you need that. You need those reps going faster than you would ever go in an actual gunfight to get the speed you need in the gunfight to where it's subconscious and without too much bandwidth in your brain. And I keep saying bandwidth, but it's pretty obvious when somebody is clogging down mentally because they haven't learned to do things this quickly at that level, right? And you can watch their performance degrade. And in like an event where they weren't being stressed, if they weren't being tested, their performance would be just fine because they've worked that pace over and over again. But the problem is under that stress, now that pace isn't sustainable without mistakes because of the stress, I think. I think you have to build that performance buffer in.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, man. And it's funny you say when someone is clogging down. I think maybe the mainstream out there might think that, well, if I do something really fast, I'm going to do it so fast that you can't respond to it. But I agree, it's not the speed on just an individual movement or an individual thing. Even when we're talking about a fight, it's the ability to process what's happening. And man, I just don't think there's much better than someone learning to flow through a stage or two. I mean, I work with some top level guys, and that's one of the things we do at the end is set up some stages kind of things and work on flowing through those stages. And I'll tell them I don't teach CQB. I'm not here to teach you CQB. There are many people that are way, way, way better at it. I'm just going to teach you how to use now the marksmanship and manipulation techniques that we worked on, and movement and balance and positioning and aiming at speed in this kind of flow circumstance, if you will. And I just think there's tremendous value in that.
And then take it to like the defensive side, right? So one-on-one fights, just they happen to involve a gun in this circumstance. So take the gun away and make it just a fight. What makes somebody a truly good fighter is more than just how well they can punch or kick or do a hip throw or do a double leg takedown or submit somebody, right? Like those are all technical things. But to get to the technical part, you got to work through everything else. And the guys that are really good work through everything else faster. I think that the OODA loop gets thrown out a lot like a buzzword without really understanding it. But in this context, it's an accurate model for what I'm talking about. The guys that can go through the other steps before the action step more correctly without as many mistakes and do it quicker win the fight. They don't have to have the best punch or kick.
Yeah.
You see guys that are technically inferior beat technically superior fighters all the time because they have better attributes. They're better at doing that.
It's funny, and I know you do BJJ now. I'm reflecting as you're saying this. Like my coach, local, I haven't trained for a while because I've been really focused on matches and very cautious about injuries. But he is smaller than me, and yes, does he have better technique than me? He certainly does. But have I seen most of the techniques he's doing, if not all of them, or the counters? I know the technique and I know the counters because I'm a higher level BJJ grappler as well. So then it's like, wait a second, he's smaller than me, and I've seen the techniques and the counters, the techniques. So how does he beat me? Because he's ahead of me in that loop. Yep. He's processing information faster than I am. I can't think through the technique as fast as he is, and there's only one way to learn that, is that's to roll. The role in CQB is to do CQB or do matches, and they're all integrated. But it's all, what, it's funny. It's all comes down to the one thing: information processing and utilizing those techniques at speed.
Yeah. And so here's another buzzword, right? People throw around the word automaticity on the tactical side. The competition side probably hasn't heard of it too much, but it's just executing a skill subconsciously without error, basically. And that becomes so important when you have other things to think about.
Yeah, agreed, man. And we can always default to technique. Like the more your technique is myelinated and it's correct, and you have ingrained a proper response to that button input. When you push that button, that's always going to be better. But eventually, we've got to log, or we've got to chain those techniques together. And there's only one way to do that, is to put yourself in some sort of a flow state. It's much like you could work on my punches, jab, cross, upper. You could teach me punches, my kicks, low kicks, high kicks, front thrust kicks. You could, and I could work on those a lot. I might even pair one or two together, but there's no way I could use those in a coordinated effort without some light sparring. I would have to do that to be able to put them in motion. So, yeah.
Oh, and I know what I was going to say a minute ago too. The trap, I think, for a lot of trainers that don't do any exposure to competition, right, is the whole train like you fight trap. And I think there are times where it's important to train like you fight, but I think the most of your training should be training for the fight. Like if you watch any other martial endeavor, right, or even like any other sport, nobody in football does nothing but put on the pads and scrimmage every session. Nobody who steps into the ring in the UFC does nothing but spar full contact every time they train.
Right.
And we conflate that on the tactical side, and then it becomes really dangerous because now we take that and we combine it with a tendency to look at the most probable threat, which is never the most dangerous threat.
Yeah.
And then you wind up with guys training for the lowest common denominator and training basically that like it's a real thing all the time. And that's going to be their default.
Yeah, that's a great point, man. It's funny that they do. You're right. Train like you fight and all this stuff. But at the same time, though, if you think about what you might do in a common IDPA or USPSA match, well, are you going to deploy the gun fast? Yeah. Is that a real life attribute? Yeah. Are you going to be shooting probably while you're moving or leaning or off balance, where maybe possibly the targets are moving? Is that a real life attribute? Yeah, that's probably. Are you going to be shooting at a speed as quickly as you possibly can, but still trying to process just enough information to hit what you need to hit? Is that a real life attribute? Yeah, it probably is. Are you going to have to maybe manipulate the gun and reload? Is that real life? Well, maybe not so much. There's not a lot of statistical use of reloads with civilians, almost none. Some with law enforcement and a lot more for the military guys. But, when you line it out, it's like, hey, the things we do kind of line up with the things you might have to do. And if you could do things that are a little bit harder in a match, then when you have one guy and it requires 3 rounds on a street self-defense situation, good. It's going to be a little bit easier, right? Like a little standard stage.
It's like going back to physical fights, right? Like you were a cop. You put hands on people a lot if you're an active cop, especially from our era.
Yep.
Right. You're going to get in a lot of physical confrontations. And I always found that, and once again, it's not like I ever fought in the UFC, but I was a good martial artist and I've been a martial artist my whole life. I found that unless it was an outlier, there's a couple times where I fought somebody really good and this wasn't the case. But for the most part, I would do about 80% and just wait for them to gas out or make a mistake.
Yep.
Same thing with foot chases. I used to love that. And I'm a bigger guy, so I'm more of a sprinter than a long distance runner. But the guys running from me in the foot chase are stressed out. Their heart's pumping through their chest. Even if they're really athletic, they're going to gas out.
Yes, sir.
So all I would do is I would set the exact same pace and wait for them to collapse exhausted and then just put handcuffs on them.
That's right. If you can keep them in sight, you're good. That's all you need.
That's it. Yep. And I was kind of a jerk about it too, which should come as no surprise to the people that have known me in my life. You know how most cops will yell, "You better stop running"?
Yeah.
I would yell, "You better keep running."
Hey, come on. I love it, man. And then as you're putting the cuffs on, maybe like, hey, dude, you need to work on your conditioning a little more, a little cardio, a little high and low end cardio, incorporate those 2 or 3 days a week. That's going to help you a lot when you get out.
That's right. But, that's part of the game too, right? And by game, I'm talking more the real world fight, but that's part of the equation. Like when I fought karate, like way back in the day, right? If somebody had a really good defense, if they could really cover up, I would just punch them in the elbow as hard as I could.
Yep.
And they knew it hurt me as much as it hurt them. And the look on their face was always the same. It's like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
But in that moment of like cognitive dissonance, I was able to exploit it and do another technique. Right. Yes. So that was just all I was doing was kind of hitting the reboot button on their brain while they went, what's wrong with this kid?
Right. It's not the thing they expect, man. Anytime you throw something at someone that's not the thing they expect, you typically get that gap of some sort. You throw them off their game. You throw them off balance just a little bit. So,
well, and that applies tactically too, right? Like how many times do you, like say you're clearing a structure and it's under fire and you lose the initiative. You have to have the initiative in that environment. So you figure out a way to regain the initiative. Use a flashbang, use something else. You have a distraction device set out outside the structure, right? Something to kind of get inside their loop. so that you can get the initiative again. And in a physical fight is the same way, and in a gunfight it's the same way. If you're playing cover with, a one-on-one threat as a civilian, you've got to capture that timing and do something they're not expecting.
Sure. Yeah, I completely agree, man. I completely agree. And that's where the thought comes into play. It's like, hey, like you said, just having a technique or knowing how to grip or pull the trigger or shoot the gun and hit something isn't it. Hopefully, if we really train, and the way it's training, we really focus on that, that stuff becomes so automated. So now we can free our conscious brain up to make some decisions like, okay, I need to move or do something else versus just get locked into the same response.
So I have never trained with you, right? We finally met in person at a match a week ago. But I got to tell you, a lot of people that I have trained with that I really respect credit you for a lot of the stuff they've gotten. So Tim Heron's one. He talked about how you totally changed the way Tim trains. He used to grind out like endless, mindless reps that weren't actually getting better. This is according to Tim. I'm just telling what he said. And then you got him to do more mindful reps and a less number, but more mentally focused. So let's talk about that for a minute. What's your training philosophy like, whether for shooting or any other physical skill? Like what would you pass along to the listeners?
Yeah, that's a great question, man. And Tim is a great example. Tim was a student of mine years ago, and now he's risen to the point where he's an exceptional shot and a high level competitor. Matter of fact, I think he's at the World Championship right now.
I believe he is. Yeah. Hopefully he's winning.
I hope he's doing well as well. So here's the deal. Most people are not at a point in their lives or at a stage where they have unlimited training time and an unlimited training budget. Now, technically, I don't really have those things, but I could, assuming I don't have anything scheduled and I'm not on the road, I can go to the range every single day. I have a sponsor that provides guns. They provide some ammo and some expense things. So I could technically train almost as much as I want, which may lead someone down the path of volume, right? Oh, I need a higher volume of training, higher volume of rounds, higher volume of other things, right? But what I've constantly found every time I go through that cycle of pushing too hard, shooting too much, or whatever else, or a higher volume practice session, which I'm not saying is bad, is forgetting about the quality of the technique. Like everything we do should be focused on improvement. Physical fitness, for example, cardio. This morning, my cardio was high-end cardio. I pushed red line for 5 circuits out of a 6-circuit thing, and for 30 seconds with a 3-minute rest period in between where I do some dry fire or whatever else. But that's strategic and very specific based on what I did the previous part of the week. If yesterday morning I went to the range and I shot PCC, and I limited myself to about 400 rounds. That seems like a very high volume session, but with PCC, it's actually not, right? But I could tell you that the quality of training inside of your repetitions is the key that your listeners or viewers need to focus on. I would absolutely tell them that quality over quantity is the way to get better. Because think about this. Here's the bad part, the downside. Anytime we do a movement or a repetitive thing of any kind, we're ingraining that thing. So every time we do a repetition that's not correct, we're ingraining or building that habit into the system. So let's say an unfired shot, something where we're like, I'm working with my PCC and I want to shoot it faster. I'm working on my handgun skills and I want to shoot it faster. And I do 5 or 6 or 10 or 20 reps of shooting that handgun as fast as I possibly can, but I neglected the aiming process of whatever variety that is needed. And that, as you know, that depends on, well, where's the target? How far is it? Stuff like that. But the bottom line is that's not a quality rep, but it's ingrained. We don't get a chance of saying, okay, that was a bad rep. Let me delete it. Guess what? It's absorbed through your vision and your unconscious mind. And I wrote a part of my book many years ago. I had a stage at the Nationals. This was in Missoula, Montana. Probably, Matt, I'm thinking it was 2000 and I don't even know. It was 5, 7. It was a long, long time ago. And I distinctly remembered in this stage, you had a target to the left and a target to the right, and then a hallway that went down to the forward and then to the left. but all of the targets were headshots. All of them were hardcover from the neck down. And I drew the handgun. By the way, in this day 2 of the match, I think I might have been in the lead for the first time ever. I didn't know that, but I was shooting really well. Turned to the left and shot 2 headshots, turned to the right and turns to the right and shot, and knew as I shot those headshots, I just pulled 2 shots over the top of the head. I knew I missed, but I couldn't make myself slow down enough to process the sight, the sight alignment and position that I needed to. Entered the hallway into the first position, shot 1 shot into the target, another one over to the head. Next position, into the target, over the head. My conscious mind is screaming and going, you are missing headshots. I shot 1 more position and I shot another miss. In the last 2 positions, I actually did what I needed to do to fire shots on the head. So your audience may say, well, dummy, why did you do that? Here's the point. My point is my conscious observation and unconscious were at a conflict. My conscious mind was saying, dude, you are shooting misses. I'm seeing this. You're shooting over the top of the head. You're not letting the sight return. You're not indexing the right spot. My unconscious is just pulling the trigger at the speed that I trained at. Well, guess what? 95% of my training was body shots prior to that. So my visual processing speed in my brain had learned that pace, right? So under a little bit of stress, it starts to apply that pace, even though my visual conscious processing side says, that's not right. And I knew it. I literally knew it. So I walked off the stage. I think I had 5 misses on that stage. And that was it for me for the match. There was no coming back from that. So my method of training is quality, 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 quality. If over our lifetime of training, let's just say, Matt, we have 2 million reps of whatever thing, a punch or a shot or a movement to evade a blade, whatever you're training for, whatever you're doing, the higher percentage or number you can that's quality. And I'm not saying that you need to go slow or fast or anything like that, but quality repetitions that will accomplish the desired result is critical in training. So quality over quantity, less is probably more. That's my entire method of training, no matter what I'm doing. I don't want to waste a moment of my time, and I don't want to ingrain bad reps.
So I've got an observation and a question.
Okay.
So the first observation is that I have been so guilty of that throughout my life so many times. I've been fortunate enough to have jobs where I basically had, at least on paper, unlimited ammo. Although I have discovered that unlimited doesn't truly mean unlimited. You care about shooting. But it's still a huge amount of ammo that I was able to shoot. And there were several years where I tried to hit 100,000 rounds in 1 year. I never made it, but I came close. The last couple of years, I have shot maybe 20,000 rounds per year and improved more than I did in the years I was attempting to shoot 100K, right?
Yeah.
So 1/5 of the ammo is giving me better results than that. And that's something I've been talking a lot about in my courses, and it's been generally well received, but the language at first kind of gives people a bit of pause because they associate it with kind of a different type of endeavor than what we're doing, or different kind of people than what we are typically as shooters. But it's that you have to have mindful reps. Like every rep has to be mindful. And that doesn't mean it has to be 100% correct, I don't think.
That's right.
Like there are times where I will push speed to the limit. And I don't do this a lot. I try to do it less because I tend to do it by personality a lot anyway. So I try to do it less than I really feel like. But the idea here is that if I can't tell that I missed and why, it's a wasted rep. I've gone too fast. So even when I'm pushing the speed at the maximum, I'm really trying to control, and this is one of my demons that I fight. Like it's not like I'm good at it, but I'm trying to control it just enough to know, because I can't diagnose what needs to be fixed if I don't know what went wrong. And I think people when they're pushing speed will sometimes go to the point where it becomes what Rob Epifania calls a garbage rep, where you just have no idea what you did. You shot fast. It was under the par time you set in your head, but it doesn't help you if you're not learning from it. So that's yes.
Mindful reps, man, is that phrase and that use of words is the key. Because, and you said something critical that hopefully your audience picked up, that you sometimes we need to push speed, right? Matter of fact, in all of the games that we play, in all practical shooting games and in all defensive shooting games and CQB shooting aspects, speed is a huge part of the equation, right? I mean, speed wins in matches, assuming we have an acceptable level of accuracy. Speed absolutely wins in fights and certainly in CQB situations, right? So speed is always a product we're looking for, but that mindful aspect of training those reps, specifically talking about shooting, means that you're aware of what's happening while you're doing it. And you need to push to those speeds. So you make a mistake, and then we need to find out how to solve those problems. Well, I missed the sight process, the sighting process. I couldn't stabilize it out. Why? Because I misindexed the gun. I grabbed it wrong. I didn't. And we could say, okay, now let me practice grabbing the gun. But that mindfulness, mindful reps are key. And you know, it's funny you said you try to shoot 100,000 rounds. I don't know if I've ever shot 100,000 rounds in a year. It's been upwards of 60 to 70, probably a couple times. But I don't believe there's many humans that I know that can truly be mindful in practice at that volume of live fire and or dry fire. I just don't. I think that's the limitation. In theory, if Mike Seeklander could shoot 150,000 rounds a year and be mindful for 150,000 rounds, assuming I had the physicality to carry that out, I would be unbeatable. Right? In theory, right? If you could establish and handle the pressure in a match. But I don't think many people can be mindful at that level, you know. I just don't think they can.
I can tell you flat out, I couldn't. I wasn't able to. It was counterproductive.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I got to 100,000. I want to be very clear. Like, my goal was 100,000. I don't think I ever got over 70. It's hard to fit 100,000 rounds in. It's difficult to do.
30 to 40 or 50,000 rounds in practice is a lot of vast. And, you know, I think a lot of the listeners, your listeners, the average person out there, maybe that's not a competitive shooter or in some sort of law enforcement or military entity, they're not even getting close to that round count, right? So they're getting a lower volume. So they really need to focus on quality. I think that's even more important when the quantity goes down. The quality has to go up even more so.
Yep. No, I completely agree. And my second question, second point, first question. So I found that one of the most difficult things for me and for the people I train to develop as an attribute, nothing to do with their pure shooting skill, speed and accuracy on reloads, draws, all the building blocks, right? Assume those are there. One of the hardest things to develop is the ability to have a good mental transmission. And what I mean by that is, like, you were talking about body shots versus headshots. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you wound up shooting the headshots at your body shot, acceptable sight picture, acceptable trigger press.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
So I've been trying to do a lot of stuff, both with my students and myself, the last few years, on being able to pick a shooting pace. Now, the pace has to be executed subconsciously, but picking the pace consciously. Like, here's how I'm engaging this target, right? Based on risk and difficulty. And I think it's really hard for people to turn that rheostat, that volume knob, up and down appropriately in the moment under stress. And people wind up, because the shots, like whether in a match or in a gunfight, the shots are very seldom beyond your technical ability. They're not. Like, you know, if you're a high C, low B class shooter, the shots are probably not beyond your level of accuracy and speed in training, right? I'm not saying that their speed would be the same as your speed or, you know, Eric Graffel's, but they're going to be able to shoot them accurately and relatively quickly, even as like a low B class, high C class shooter. But where it falls apart is they're not choosing the appropriate technique for the target they're addressing because they're getting stuck on something else. Either their mind is overriding them and they're trying to shoot as fast as humanly possible because they're under stress, or they're addressing a target inappropriately based on the target they just addressed, or the target they're about to address, and they're not turning that volume up and down. I think. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I think you're right. I think that, so I think the way to go to the next level there is to spend some time in training. So any given practice session, depending on what you're working on, you know, for you or the audience is to work some time and maybe it's at the end of the session, maybe it's during the session, on visual processing and shot calling to an extent, but it's visual processing. It's not just like, hey, I fire one shot. Can I call that shot? Meaning, where exactly was the dot when I fired the shot, or what was the relationship of the iron sights on the target downrange when I fired the shot? I'm talking about the ability to process and make decisions on what you're visually processing. So an example might be, I have this drill I set up. I call it busy, and there's no specific target set up, but the target setup should mimic what you're training for, right? So a defensive shooter could set up like, 5 or 6, 7 targets. Let's just say between probably 3 yards and 11 to 12 yards. If you're shooting for a USPSA or IDPA, you may set up 5 or 6 or 7 targets at varying distances, as well as varying difficulties. And what I mean by that is, I might have 2 targets that are between 6 and 7 yards, but one is wide open and one has a non-threat or a no-shoot on it, right? And then practice taking your PCC, handgun, or whatever, through those targets, left to right, right to left. And I'll give you another example here in a second. But fire the scoring zone that would give you the best result at a pace that you can accomplish that, right? And then, so it might be pop, 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 pop. So you're constantly varying your speed. So the targets need to be set up in a manner where you're constantly varying your speed, and you're going faster and slower and faster, slower and faster and slower, right? And then we don't have to draw. We don't have to do anything. Just shoot the gun. Now do it again and learn what it looks like to maintain that speed. Like, what does the aiming process actually look like to hit 2 or 3 shots in the desired area? And then crank your speed dial up. And then do it again. So what you're training yourself to do is visually recognize where you can no longer shoot at that speed or any faster and end up with the desired result. As you know, if we're training for USPSA, it's a different pace than IDPA, because all IDPA stages are in essence a 1 hit factor. They're very low hit factor. In USPSA, if you do hit factor scoring, the lower the hit factor, the more points we should be trying to shoot on the stage. The higher the hit factor, the more speed we should be pushing on the stage. But when you set that up, it's a great exercise, and then push faster and faster. And then the best way to do it, let's say we have targets 1 through 7, left to right, and they're all a combination of near to far, different varieties, angled, everything you can imagine. So I may shoot target 1 through 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 with 2 shots. And then I'll go 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then I'll go 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2. So I'm varying the order of shooting these targets, but I'm still trying to apply that visual processing of shooting the best points I can at speed, and then go a little bit faster and a little bit faster and a little bit faster. So what it does is, what you just talked about was kind of setting a pace, an expectation on a group of targets. Hey, I'm going to shoot at this pace. I'm saying, let's teach the brain to process the visual picture of what we're seeing, so it can automatically adjust the speed as necessary as we're shooting. And that's a fantastic drill.
I like that a lot. And on the topic of your drills, I have to talk about transition hell.
Yep. Yes.
I am so mad at you for that drill.
Hey, well, yeah, okay. Go. Let's talk about transition hell, man.
No, I love that drill. I love that.
Me
drill.
too.
I'm mad in the way that you're mad when you can't do something as well as you wish you could.
Yes.
But this kind of ties into what you were just saying. Is I've noticed, because I put a significant amount of time in that drill, both in live fire and in the ACE VR.
Yep.
Since they dropped it in ACE, since I was exposed to it. And it's really interesting because it's the drill I used as a little science experiment. I know it was only a population of 1, but I shot it in ACE and then directly to the range right after and shot it live fire.
Yep.
And whether you scored at hit factor or part time, I was like right there in both environments.
Yeah.
So that was kind of proof to me that the efficacy of the whole VR thing, right? But something I've noticed after shooting that drill for a while pretty consistently is that I can see myself make little micro corrections on the plate rack.
Yep.
And it's not something I'm thinking about with my conscious mind at all, but I'm just kind of watching the shooting happen. So I'm at my true, match pace on it, not when I'm really pushing speed, right?
Yes.
But I will watch the dot drive to the plate and be not quite where I would like it to be. And it's like it's correcting itself. I mean, I know it's my subconscious doing it,
Right.
but it's really neat to just kind of watch, because those two open targets you can hammer.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So hammering the open, then driving to the plate, it's neat because now I can see the dot maybe go not quite far enough and then fix itself, or go too high and drop a little lower, or go just past and come back. And it's happening before my conscious mind is even aware that the dot's not in the right place. And that's a really cool effect of that drill, though. I really like that drill a lot.
Yeah. And that's a great example of that visual processing, where we just really let the unconscious do what it's been trained to do through our visual aspects. And, for the audience, the transition hell, it actually came about where my buddy Max and Michelle and I were on the range training, and he does this very specific plate warm up. And then we did his standard exercise and we did some of my things. But on his plate warm up, after we're done, I'm like, oh, hold on, dude. I walked down range and I set 2 targets up, at whatever they were, 45 degrees, but pretty close. So the 2 targets, 1 target to the left and 1 target to the right, are, I don't remember, 5 or 7 yards away. They're not very far, but it's a pretty wide swing. So imagine, folks, if you're listening to me right now, a plate rack or a plate in the center, and then 2 wide targets, open targets to your right and left. And the goal is to, draw and fire 2 on the left quickly, stop on the plate, knock the plate over, 2 on the right, stop on the plate in the center. So you're going back and forth. And then Max is like, I love this. And then he told his Ace VR people about it. And they're like, they put it in there. And as Max is drilled in later on, they're like, oh, it's Max and Mike's drill. It doesn't matter who owns it, but it's unbelievably challenging. And Matt, I found myself on that day, and then in the future days, I was having, I never say can't. My original instructor said, you can't say can't. It was very difficult for me to maintain my dot on the target long enough before I transitioned to play, because I wanted to go, right? The second I initiated that trigger pull, in the reality, the dot has to lift. The shot has to have fired before you can move the gun. So I was pulling off the target. So, and then like you said, that visual processing and correction of the gun on the plate, it's like when you finally start to see the dot just starts to go center or more center, and something is causing that, it's like, wow, okay, something's working, right?
Well, my buddy Frank Proctor said something years ago to me that I really took to heart. And he said it actually in our SFAUC class, our CQB SWAT school for SF guys, right? Frank is a guy that got me competing. Because he was in 20th group as well. So he said that we all have this super computer in our subconscious. And if we treat it like a computer and give it very specific desired goals, desired end states, and give it right and left limits, and then give it all the data, it'll figure it out.
Yes.
Like your conscious mind doesn't even have to figure it out. It will happen. But you got to be very clear about the desired end state. You've got to be very clear about the left and right limits, and you've got to give it very accurate data for that to happen. And that's really influenced kind of how I trained in recent years, is trying to do just that, trying to tell my subconscious, here's what I want.
Yep.
Here's what we can't do, left and right limits. And here's all the data, and just be like brutally honest with the data. Because I think that's the other thing too, is people cherry pick data. They think about their personal best rather than what they do on an average run. Because the average run is actually your true skill level, not the personal best.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And that input of data, man, that's an example of doing a bad rep. And once you get bad data in, like we said, that very powerful subconscious mind, that incredible supercomputer with like a 3-year-old brain, it doesn't know what's right or wrong, right? So we got it. We have got to protect it and give it good input. And you look at all humans out there that have some sort of scarred existence. Maybe vets with PTSD, or an individual civilian that was attacked and scarred for life. That's at the unconscious level, driven by memory, but unconscious level, where they're like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I don't know why I start freaking out and sweating when I smell this smell or hear this sound. There's an unconscious scarring there because it's a supercomputer that's designed to automate things for us. Same thing in training. And the better the information, like you said, in the left and right lateral limits you give it, the better when the brain scrambler, the timer goes off, or the real world brain scrambler of a guy trying to kill you or hurt you or your family. And that's what you're going to get out of it.
You just gave me a great idea for a blog post. It's not fully fleshed out, but we automate our trauma.
Ooh, yes.
Yeah, no, I got to do some research. That's a topic to do some research on and think about.
Love it.
Yeah, so before we wrap up, because we've gone over an hour, I always go over an hour with the good ones. It's like I can't help it. Tell everybody about what you've got out there, your books that are for sale, your training classes, your videos, how they can find them, where they can get them, where they can sign up for a class with you. Let's get that information out to everybody.
Yeah, so just two primary areas. My main website where you'll find my training and my store. And by the way, I fired my shipper recently, so I had 2 pallets of stuff shipped to me here, and I'm selling it at a discount rate because I just don't have space for it. So I'm selling books and DVDs and USBs and these training programs that we talked about. There's the defensive training program series, the defensive rifle, and the competition handgun, among other things. It's all on sale for like 40 to 50% off. I'll never do that again. I'm just literally trying to get rid of stuff. Shooting-performance.com. Of course, Matt, you've been on our podcast a few times, and you could find out about the American Warrior Society or the American Warrior Show on AmericanWarriorSociety.com. And so those 2 primary areas, you'll find most of what you want about me. On Shooting-Performance, my classes are listed as well. There's some online stuff and some on-range things this year. I don't have a ton more left, but it's there. And I'm looking at starting some new endeavors very shortly that I can't really talk about too much right now, but it should be exciting to your audience as well, man. So that's probably the best resource for folks to get on. I have a blog as well. I'm not quite as active as you. I've been kind of lazy on my blog, but there's some pretty good articles where I put some of these questions to test and check that out. So please check those areas out.
Yeah, no, everybody should definitely check them out. Like I said, I've never trained with you in person, but I've got a bunch of your training products and they've been really good. And a lot of people whose opinions I really trust credit you with their improvement. So that's enough for me to give you a wholehearted endorsement. I think everybody should seek it out.
Well, I thank you, man. I appreciate that. And I have your book and love it as well. And I certainly talk about endorsing that. And, it's funny. I didn't realize how many things we had historically aligned. You were in the Army, I was in the Marines, but a lot of things very, very similar. You have a lot more experience in certain areas and I have some more experience in some areas, but certainly I think our training methodologies align in a lot of different ways. But yeah, folks, if you want to check out what I offer, I always enjoy talking to people too. So if someone has a question or wants to jump on the gram and throw something at me, they can as well.
Well, and thanks for coming on. I knew this would be a good conversation and it did not disappoint. So I really enjoyed it. We should do part 2 if you don't mind.
Let's do part 2. Audience, if you have questions you want to discuss, we'll throw them out there and let's do it, man. I'm in. You let me know when.
All right. Sounds good. Well, hope everybody enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Make sure to go ahead and check out his stuff. You need to get some of his books and videos, if nothing else. And definitely go to a training class if you can, because there's a lot of good information there. From my end, if you don't mind helping me defeat the algorithm and the evil social media people, click like, subscribe, and all that other good stuff. And I will talk to everybody soon.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Way is in Training. Please come back again as we explore how training makes us better at our craft and better in our everyday lives. See all of you soon.